Good evening. It's time for another episode of Real True Facts, the Real True Podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Eliza Cuthbert.
And I am Howard Lovecraft. Not that one.
Not that one.
Not that one.
No. It is our final week of the Real True Facts Monster Mash, and we have saved your favorite for last. We want to suck your blood. Tonight's show is dedicated entirely to vampires.
Yes, Dracula and all the other famous ones that I can't think of at the moment.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm just trying not to think of Twilight.
Right.
You know, but other than that, they're famous ones.
Nosferatu.
Yeah, Antonio Banderas in that movie about vampires.
Yeah, David Boreanaz, Angel, Buffy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Vampire Hunters.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I'm probably in the minority. I was always a fan of the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer with Paul Rubens.
Yes. Yeah, he was the best part. Luke Perry was in there too.
Yes, yeah. He was as well. Probably was he still playing a high school student?
Yes.
I think yes. You know, up until his untimely demise, he was forever playing a high school student. Hopefully, he's portraying a high school student up in heaven now.
Hopefully, rest in peace. Yeah, I mean, Buffy, very campy. The show. I mean, obviously, one of my biggest influences creatively. I love that. That's where most of my vampire lore comes from. I'm kind of, that's sort of gospel for me. So, you stake them through the heart. They turn to dust. No sunlight. None of the sparkly stuff. I don't know where that originated, but, no sunlight, crucifix, good times there. We've got many different levels of vampires. You've got your, master, and you've got your sires and all these things. So that's sort of where I'm gathering all my knowledge.
I do have to admit, what is it? What We Do in the Shadows? Or something?
Yeah.
That would probably be my my most modern influence. I did enjoy the film and the TV show, so I forgot about that. And one of my, I think the most realistic portrayals of a vampire was in that show with the kind of emotional vampire. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes.
But
yes.
When I see that, that's perhaps too prevalent. It's that might be people you encounter many times every day. So I maybe that can't be very rare after all.
Well, the psychic vampires, we know those exist. They suck out all the good vibes in the room and leave you with a bad feeling. You meet someone and you just feel exhausted after that. That's an emotional vampire. That's a psychic vampire. So we know those exist for sure. But what do you think about Dracula? He's sort of our OG here when we talk about the Monster Mash. We ran a poll on our Instagram of who your favorite monster was, and we were split right down the middle of Frankenstein's monster and Dracula. It was 50-50. So we decided to save him for the end, but I was curious, Howard, just what do you think about Dracula? Like, where are you with that?
I think he falls into that realm of historical fiction where it really is based on some truth. Whether it's Vlad the Impaler, times are crazy now and have always been, and so I just have to imagine people would whether it's drink blood, suck blood, bathe in blood, someone's done it. And I guess the question might come into play as far as maybe some of the details, right? Some of the semantics. Can anyone really have the fangs and suck blood and live off of it? And, and that kind of stuff. Maybe, maybe that's where it gets caught up. But I got to say, there are definitely people who've tried it. And so I guess we'll, have to find out where fact and fiction, intertwine. What do you think, Eliza? I mean, are you just like, yes, vampires are 100% real in their most traditional form, or Dracula was, he wore really cool capes and it was 100% OG vampire?
Oh, you can't deny the coolness factor of the cape. So in that case, I mean, yes, and Dracula definitely did exist. But in the other cases, I'm not sure. I'm skeptical about that stuff because when you look at Dracula in his most original form, you have this almost noble person in a castle, sequestered away, cursed, doomed to eternal life, desperate for human interaction. And, he becomes obsessed with his victims. He can shapeshift
Mm,
into a bat. He wants to drain their life force, but also add them to his coven of brides, which he might feed off of still. I mean, because there's so many liberties that have been taken with the story over the years, and there's been so many versions and sexy versions and horrific versions. So I really don't know what the definite um, version of Dracula is. I mean, I'm very open to it. I know people are fascinated with vampires. They are obsessed with them, if only in the way they supposedly dress and act. When I think about vampirism, I think about the 90s a lot. That was very popular with the goth
yeah,
scene.
goth and hot topic.
Yeah,
Right.
and Angelina Jolie with the bottle of vial of blood she kept around her neck that was Billy Bob Thornton's. Like, there's very just vampiristic activities
Mm,
going on over the
mm,
years. So I know people are obsessed with that. And, I say obsessed, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that it's so ingrained in our culture and we have romanticized it to a point. So I know it exists, but in the way that we're talking about, I don't know.
mm. Yeah, yeah, it makes me wonder if the whole goth movement would and could exist without vampires.
Yeah, I feel like if we took vampires out of goth culture or even our own society, a lot of things that we have would just fall apart. So maybe they're deeper ingrained than we thought.
Yeah, I think they are pretty deeply ingrained, and I'm kind of curious. We were talking about what makes a vampire, and one thing that came to my mind was mosquitoes, and
Oh,
and I don't know what that exactly means, but mosquitoes live off of blood.
they do.
So could a vampire just be a giant mosquito? And so that makes me kind of think of animals and biology and stuff. So I think, I mean, maybe we should talk about the biology if we can get a hold of Dr. Seymour.
I think we should. I think we should. Sometimes the signal's a little patchy down in the bunkers. Let me see if I can get through the mainframe and get him up here. Dr. Seymour, are you here?
Yes, I am. Good to hear from you.
Yes.
Great to have you. We're just discussing vampires, and I thought of mosquitoes, and mosquitoes, they live off of blood. That's their main source of sustenance, right? And so makes me wonder if a bigger creature, or if there are any other creatures that we may not be aware of, have those kind of similar tendencies or operate in the same way.
Yes, mosquitoes are kind of our, especially when we have the time to venture outside, and maybe summer or fall, they're our most notorious blood sucking pests. There, they do live off of blood. Actually, the female mosquito lives off of blood, and that's only. It's not a year-round thing. So this is an interesting. It's not just mosquitoes like the smell of sunscreen or something. So
Hmm.
mosquitoes, they do. There are other ways they can get their sustenance, but female mosquitoes, in order to reproduce and to make eggs, need blood. So it's an important part for that species of their reproduction.
Hmm.
Wow. So, are there any other animals in the animal kingdom that maybe not drink blood or use blood as their only form of nutrition or sustenance, but that just that use it as well?
Yeah, so probably a couple that once we say them, you'll be like, oh, of course. But fleas
Mm-hmm.
do suck
Oh,
blood. Normally,
of
we think of
course.
them animal blood. Leeches are notorious for sucking blood as well. Medically speaking, or if we want to call it pseudo medicine, over time they've been used intentionally for that.
Yes.
So a couple different insects that do it, but there are actually a few few birds that live off of the blood of animals. They're kind of much like a mosquito. It's not their only source of sustenance, but it is very intentional and very definite a source of certain vitamins for these birds.
Oh, wow. And of course, we're talking about birds pre-year 2000, right?
Pre-year 2000, yes.
Yeah.
So classic biological birds. And of course, we have seen the government adapt to mimic that.
Yeah.
So even those traits as well. If you can believe it, one of the birds, especially topical here, that does classically use blood for part of its sustenance is called a vampire finch.
Oh.
So with the government and other entities being able to use these birds for their purposes, that could be a perfect way to get blood samples from all over the world. And
23andMe, yeah.
Yep. And we just assume that the gene testing kits that we send in gives the government a good database, but they've already been doing it with their artificial birds, gathering up samples in the wild from us and other animals, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. And I wouldn't be surprised if the nanotechnology is getting to the point where the fleas and the mosquitoes are supporting that as well. There's so much more testing you can do for your dogs now for their DNA that it really makes sense to be a crossover with the fleas.
Yeah, fleas live on dogs. Now, you brought up the vampire birds, but the big one, vampire bats. We know those are real. Could be an influence on the human vampire mythology. But I read somewhere that vampire bats don't actually suck blood.
Vampire bats are real. Vampire bats, I was getting to this as the stunning, reveal or climax.
Oh,
yes. They're the only species that lives only on blood.
I see.
But yeah, it comes down to the definition of what do we consider sucking blood. They drink blood, they lick blood, but they don't have kind of a straw-like mechanism or fangs that draw it in. So like a leech sucks blood, a mosquito sucks blood. The vampire bat bites you. It has fangs, but then it licks the blood up. So it seems like we got a little bit in the human vampire. I don't want to say mythology. I'll say story or narrative, because to say that it's totally a myth, we've learned our lesson there. But there's definitely some crossover of some different stories or different animals that we've seen and animals that are very real.
Wow. That's so we're getting quiet where you can just hear our gears turning as we're thinking. Now, I've heard of a proboscis, right? That's like a tube or a mammal thing used for sucking blood. So it makes me wonder if proboscis was a small thing in a mouth that a mammal had, if that could really, like a tooth,
like or a needle,
or a fang. Then maybe we're closer to a genetic mutation that leads to a human or larger mammal vampire that just goes around and sucks blood.
I do think that that's very reasonable. We see in reptiles fangs that can excrete liquid, so I don't know why a mechanism doing the opposite isn't just as reasonable.
Oh, good point. Yeah, reptiles. They have sacs that excrete venom, and those fangs are tubular.
Yeah,
and they shoot it out. And so, what's to say, an animal can't shoot it back in or suck it right out?
It's there. It's there. I want to talk for a minute about the light sensitivity, because one of the things about vampires is that they cannot go out during the day. They will burst into flames. So we're looking at something that is completely nocturnal to the point where daylight kills them. Is there anything in the animal kingdom that's like that? I mean, I know we deal with nocturnal things, but is there such a serious, I guess, photosensitivity in there that would cause something to die if it was exposed to sunlight?
There are, in very kind of rare, extreme cases of photosensitivity, where the pigment of the skin can be so extreme one way or another, where the sensitivity is such that kind of we could think, a baby's skin, for example, we've got all the SPF 50s for them because their skin hasn't been weathered or exposed to it. Well, we could take that further in terms of lack of exposure. And then you've got your really fair skinned people who burn when they stand next to the microwave, if you will. And if you get the right cross of those, you can get very, very extreme reactions to sun. I don't know that we've seen in a human the way we normally describe it in a vampire, but I also don't know that we would see that human out and about very often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be one difficult thing to prove because of years of evolution, leading any being that may be susceptible to that to actually have some pretty decent defenses to make sure that doesn't happen. It makes me wonder, perhaps Dracula was a ginger. We don't really see that portrayed.
Perhaps.
We don't see it portrayed, but the way we describe the skin pigmentation and the photosensitivity, I'm thinking that maybe Dracula or some of the famous vampires that weren't portrayed as such were could have been gingers or redheads. I'm not sure what the technical term is, but
I think it is all of the recessive traits all at once. You don't have any dominant traits. It's like all the things that skip generations, but they all compile in one person, and then I guess that's how you would get a vampire.
Yeah, it's very reasonable. The necessity to do blood could be something with iron deficiencies as they build up. Just a lot of the traits that we try to breed out, if we bred them back in, would create very real weaknesses that would take a very specific set of adaptations to overcome.
Interesting. Wow.
Here's one for you. One last question before we send you back down into the bunker. Can human beings survive off of blood?
It's a very interesting question, and the answer, I can't think of any reason why the answer would be no. We're very hesitant, I guess, to jump in to say yes, they can for sure. But to think of what deficiency may be there in terms of nutrients, in terms of hydration, in terms of the essential building blocks of life, I don't know what would be missing, but it would be something that would be hard to support without experimentation that it wouldn't work.
So it's very possible. So when we have all of these people that are fascinated with vampires and they want to live that way, and some people even do resort to drinking blood, or even in tiny amounts, I guess those people could be technically considered vampires and living in that way.
Yes. Yeah. The traits, what do I want to call them? The nuances, the characteristics that they are taking on that are maybe a cause and effect, not just a cause, not just the effect, but kind of a cycle there of doing the behaviors, and then the behaviors causing a specific outcome that only accelerates the behavior more, if you will, could be a cycle, and people who dabble in that might be getting into a dangerous game.
Wow. Dr. Seymour, thank you so much for coming out of the science bunker to talk to us about this right now.
Yeah, it was great to catch up with you, and can't wait to hear from you again soon.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and send you back down in the science bunker. And why don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll meet our very special guest today. Welcome back to the Real True Facts Monster Mash. Our guest tonight goes by the nickname Doc French, and he is the foremost expert on Dracula from the American Vampirism Institute of Research. I believe that's the AVIR. Please welcome Doc French to the show.
Thank you. It's a good pleasure to be here. Pleasure.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm pretty good. Having a pretty good night. How are you?
Oh, we're fantastic. You know, we are really enjoying our show. We just talked to Dr. Seymour. I know you flew in from the Institute, so you just got here. So thank you so much for just dropping everything and coming on the show.
Well, trustees, board of trustee meeting went a little long, so sorry for just getting in here at the last minute, but happy to be here. You know, always big fan of the show, so I'm glad to be a guest.
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, with something as popular and sensational as vampires, you know, there are a lot of experts saying, "Oh, yeah, have me on." Real True Facts. I want to break it wide open. I want to tell you what I've learned. You know, I'm an expert. I know this. I know that. But we're like, no, we got to stick with Doc French because because he really lays down a lot of the science and the facts when it comes to vampirism, and can really back things up, unlike a lot of folks who seem to be a little bit more speculative and don't necessarily have the research that a research institute can offer.
Well, that's one thing about the Research Institute, is that we focus on the research, and in researching we are able to, that's how we learn. So that's what it's all about.
So you are an expert on Dracula. I imagine there's lots of different kinds of vampires out there, but you have dedicated your life to the specific one who is Dracula. Now, what made you want to get into that just specific singular vampire?
Well, I think like so many of these things, it started with a paper in college, and the topic that I submitted did not get approved, and therefore my professor said, "Hey, why don't you write about Dracula?" The school where I was going offered a vampire studies master's. It's only like a year and a half, so I figure I can live at home. I don't have to get a job quite yet. I get this Dracula degree. Next thing you know, the school starts a PhD program. I was one of amongst the first class. So, I guess it just kind of, it found me. It found me, I guess. And then it's just, Dracula is so fascinating. The second you learn two things, you fall in love. So.
Now,
it really sounds like it was some kismet. Like you were in the right place at the right time.
It really was. 'Cause here's the thing: I was going to go out for football that year, but then, lo and behold, 40 time was bad. I had a bum knee. Anyway, I wound up in this class, and I'm trying to write about football. I was going to write about when Bo Jackson, when he broke his hip. I was going to write a paper about that. She said, I don't think that there's enough sources for you to find to write a long enough paper. And then she said, "How about Dracula?" And we were off.
Yeah, we know the rest from there.
Yeah.
So, in your research, because I know you've been doing this for many years now, and we all fall into things from time to time. I mean, you didn't set out to live this life, but obviously it has become incredibly important to you to just dedicate years now. In the beginning, did you focus on Dracula as a person, or were you trying to debunk vampires? You're trying to figure out who the person was, or, are we looking at Vlad the Impaler, the historical context of it? Run us through kind of where you started in your research.
Well, I started reading the book, the Bram Stoker,
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Which first, if I could, as a sidebar, I feel like that guy, I don't know. I'm not a fan. Just not a fan of his writing, but started with the Bram Stoker, and I was like, who got into it? It was, who is this guy? Like who is the real guy? Like, I thought the writing sucked, but the guy I thought was really interesting. So got a little bit more into it, and that obviously led me to Vlad the Impaler, which was that was a whole year and a half of my life, honestly, that I spent just immersed, I think, in the material. I didn't know he was Romanian. I didn't know any. Up to that point, I couldn't name any Romanian people that living or dead. But I learned that pretty early on, and he was just a fun guy, I think, in a lot of ways.
That's one way to describe it, yeah.
He had the impaling, and that was an aspect of his personality and of his life. But, he was into botany. A lot of people don't know that. He loved bees, which a lot of people don't know. So he's a rich guy to learn about and to study. This was all going on mid 1400s. So, most of the common people they didn't have a clue as far as what was going on in the world. Like, the shape, the size, any of that shit. So,
we're looking at someone that was around the 1400s. From what I understand, he was sort of a ruthless killer. I think he got the name by being able to impale his victims on stakes. And I mean, honestly, all of my knowledge of Vlad the Impaler comes from this new movie, newer. I think it was around 2012. I think it was called Dracula Untold, where they sort of went through this weird history of Dracula, and they kind of talked about how he was just trying to protect his family, and he was a ruthless general in a Transylvanian army, and ended up
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think I got to intercede, because I think we were saying ruthless by, today's standards. But I think if we were all back living in, the mid 15th century, I think we would be probably a lot more ruthless, quote, than we are and all that shit right now, Because if it's like your wife and your dog and you've got a kid or three or so, whatever, you got your wife and your kids, and then there's no police or anything, so you may have to stab some people sometimes. It was probably there's a lot more just stabbing on a daily basis and things like that were going on. So
you think this was something normal that people engaged in back then?
I don't think it was. I mean, obviously he was on the high end of the spectrum in terms of stabbings on a daily, and, impaling obviously was heavier with him than probably most people. But let's say it like this: he was a very heavy participant in a practice that was more common today than it is today. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah,
I think so. I think, he was a passionate warlord.
Yeah, that's a great. Passionate Warlord was the name of a passion project that I was working on.
So I think, I think that behavior was more commonplace back then, and he was in a position of power, so that kind of, translated into a lot of these actions. But stabbing and impaling aside, a lot of the literature brings in, drinking blood and whether it's flying or turning into bats or animals. And, one thing we always try and do here on Real True Facts is separate the fact from the fiction. So what's real? What from your research, what do you have? What kind of facts are backed up, and what is just, blown out of proportion and just fantasy?
Well, we should, I think, take it maybe kind of beat by beat there, but we'll start with drinking blood, and that's kind of back to the stabbing. I think it wasn't that everybody was drinking blood all the time, but certainly more people were drinking blood on a regular basis back in the 15th century than they are today. So, you think about that in terms of the water. The water that was available to drink was not the cleanest, not always even available. So you're going to drink other things. You're going to drink meat. You're going to drink milk. And some people are going to drink blood, especially if there's a high instance, high rate of stabbings throughout the course of the day. Ergo de facto, you're going to have more access to blood. Ergo de facto, you're going to drink more blood.
So drinking blood was it was safer than the water, which I hear a lot of stories about, especially during the Dark Ages. People drank alcohol, they drank beer all the time because it was safer than the water.
Exactly, because the water was just the cesspool of everybody's filth of the day, just all swimming together, So there was no telling what you're going to get drinking if you just drank water. So a lot of people were drinking wine, more beer. Like I said, a lot of people were drinking blood. If you had, if you're stabbing a lot of things, impaling a lot of things, that blood is what you have the most access to, then you're going to drink blood more than the average guy. So those kind of correlate together, the impalings and the blood drinking, just as kind of practical matter, practical choice in daily life,
Yeah. And now we spoke with Dr. Seymour briefly at the beginning of the show about the concept of vampires not being able to go out in the daytime. We see that a lot throughout pop culture depictions, stories, things like that. In your research, have you found that is true in the case of Dracula or other vampires that you've studied?
Well, it's really hard to pinpoint whether it's started as a choice or if it was always been a necessity. It's definitely, amongst vampires today, it's definitely a necessity that, must stay indoors. But it's hard to tell if there's some evidence to indicate that maybe they evolved to that point. Because with the terms Vlad the Impaler, there's a lot of going out at night just because that was his lifestyle. Even prior to the impalings becoming a part of his day to day, he was just going out a lot at night. People would go look at a cow, or they would go maybe by a lake back in those days, or into the woods. So he was just already going to be out at night a lot more than your average person. So.
Right. That's actually kind of harkens back to a point Dr. Seymour made about the cyclical nature of it, about how if he's, going out at night all the time and then he passes on these traits, or, and it becomes more severe. So by the time we get to modern day, maybe that's what, and then now they have to go out at night because of the cyclical nature of this evolution, in vampires. And that's interesting.
That's all of our research at the AVIR has really led to for us at the Institute to really believe in a vampiric evolution. And like you said, a lot of it kind of just it starts with Dracula. And he's kind of, if you want to think of him as maybe like a patient zero, or and then it kind of, as more vampires are made, it grows, and it becomes woven into the fabric of what it means to be a vampire.
That's interesting. So instead of this kind of horror look at it that, and maybe that's one of the reasons you didn't like Bram Stoker, was just because of the sensationalism of vampires. But we're looking at Dracula, if we consider him a patient zero, to have all of these traits and just kind of be a product of his time and environment, having to adapt to some of these behaviors. Yeah. For instance, the water not being clean, and so you have to find other things to get nutrition from, or if it's the Dark Ages or whatever, with his lifestyle, being able to just go out at night. That's how he lived. Those tales get woven and retold over and over again until you end up having something that is like a traditional horror monster of a vampire. But what you're saying here is that probably was not the case.
And yeah, exactly. And we tend to we tend to, things that we're scared of and that we don't understand, we tend to make it this big bad thing. We make more of it than what it is, so that we can justify our fear and kind of explain away these feelings that we're feeling. But a lot of times it's just a case of you and me are very different, and that's all that we can really say about it. Good and evil, and whose intentions are right and wrong is that's not for us to decide.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's not for us to decide. That's really, that we deal with this kind of moral ambiguity every week on Real True Facts. And I think that's a really good note to, for myself and for our listeners to maybe ruminate on and take a quick break. So, whenever morals come into play, I feel like I need a
minute.
Yeah, my cat is also looking at me in a way that makes me think that maybe there's something in the other room that I need to clean up. So this will be a good segue.
Well, let's take a quick break.
We're back from a short break here on Real True Facts Monster Mash, discussing Dracula and vampires this week with Doc French of the AVIR, I believe it, the American Vampiric Institute of Research. Is that correct?
Well, it's the AVIR, AVRI. There's a little bit of dispute amongst the board. For example, earlier in January, it was the AVRI. And then the board held a meeting, simple majority vote. They changed it to AVIR. So we had to change the website. That's gone on 3 times since then. So honestly, it's going to depend on what time this episode airs. But I just usually call it the Institute right now because it's so frustrating to have to explain to your bank why your paycheck says something different like 3 times within a 6-month period, just because Gene thinks that one name is better than the other. And Gene is only on the board because Gene's sister works for the Institute. And Gene is like the CEO of a company that makes wiffle balls or something. So Gene is just there as a token, but it's very frustrating.
A lot of infighting. Yeah. So you've been there a long time. How long has this institute been around, and how long have you been there?
The institute was founded in 1997, and I came on in 2004 after I completed my schooling.
Yeah.
So going on 25 years, which we are the oldest. We are the oldest vampire research institute in the nation. And the 6th oldest in North America. So that's not nothing.
Yeah. No, that's not. So we tend to ask, when we're dealing with creatures, monsters, beings that are depicted in pop culture all the time. We want to know who gets it right, who doesn't. We mentioned a few things in the beginning of the show, Buffy, Nosferatu, Twilight, which I guess is regarded as not very accurate. But who gets it right in pop culture? Are there any movies or TV shows out there that you watch and you go, oh, yeah, like that's the depiction of vampires that I've been studying my entire career?
Honestly, that's a really hard question to answer. It's kind of like asking what movie got the depiction of the human race right. But I think honestly, Count Dracula a little bit. in just the sense of the fact that the vampires aren't always scary. Also, the TV series True Blood, I think, was a great depiction of the vast desires that exist within the vampire community. It's kind of like asking that question. It's kind of like asking, what movie shows the human race right? And it's like, take like the movie Blue Chips. Like Nick Nolte plays a college basketball coach who loves his job and just cares about doing a great job. And there's a lot of people like that, but not everybody's going to go as far as to cheat like he did. And Shaquille O'Neal plays a basketball player who's huge. He's 7 feet tall, and that's some people, but not everyone. Anthony Hardaway plays he played a kid who was just trying to help his family. He had basketball. That was him, and that was a real accurate depiction of him. But not everyone's gonna cheat to get a 5-star center. So I think True Blood, as far as the fact that it shows the vast types of personalities and the vast array of differences that exist with vampires. Some vampires can fly, from what we understand at the Institute. A lot of evidence to indicate that, but not all of them. It's just like I said, it's like some of us can't slam dunk on a 10-foot hoop, but some people can.
Okay, that's actually, it's interesting that you brought that up, because that was actually going to be my next question, was kind of related to those.
I can't dunk if that was.
Oh no! I mean, we wouldn't expect
Can you?
No.
Well,
it's been a while.
You don't know if you don't try, and
Yeah, in the bunker, that's a good suggestion. I'll have to set up a regulation, at least height. Hoop here in the bunker, but
just try to touch the net first and then go from there, I would say.
Yeah, and doing reps, high reps, I believe, is what can really and then those shoes, I think, those special shoes,
I got those.
Yeah, so
because it's just because I can't dunk today, doesn't mean for tomorrow that I can't.
Right. And then, and speaking of dunking and, these superhuman abilities, some vampires can fly, some can't. So would that then translate to some vampires can, transform and others can't? Or what, some of these more impressive abilities and powers, in your research, which ones have you found to be just totally made up, and others that your research shows are, some can do and some can't?
We found with regard to transforming, it's really not very common. There's a few instances. It's maybe like 24 bats though. Like these shows where you see it's a vampire, then he turns into 100 bats. Mm-hmm. That's too many bats. It's a lot of vampires can turn into one bat, and that's probably the most common. But it's always bats, and it's no more than like 24, 25 at the very most. And that's just some vampires. That's maybe like 3% from what our research has indicated. Yeah. And that's through both we conduct a lot of polls amongst the vampire community. And then we also do just a lot of independent anecdotal and observational research going out at the night. We have a lot of... We have a good deal of vampire on our staff who will go out in the night and observe among the vampire community, see who transforms, if so, how many bats, etc. So there's a good mix of feedback directly from the community as well as observational research that's compiled those numbers.
Yeah, because that was one of my next questions, was if you had ever actually met or encountered a vampire, but it sounds like you're working directly with them. So we are dealing with descendants probably from the very first vampire. And, we're looking at instances where we have confirmation that they can shapeshift. Maybe it's been exaggerated over the generations, but they are transforming. They are taking the shape of bats. And they're furthering research, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that the Institute is all about, is the research and just trying to figure things out with vampires. A lot of what we're trying to do is figure out, is there some things that vampires might be good at that we're not as good at as far as regular humans, and things that they may be able to help with. at night a lot is what we're looking at mostly. Just trying to like get things places faster. Although Amazon is pretty hard to compete with as far as that goes right now. So
I've got that 2-day. Yeah.
yeah, you know, I ordered a pair of pants earlier in last week. I thought they were going to get there the next day. I go outside like 6 hours later. They're in front of my door. So blew my mind.
That's some vampire technology, maybe. I wanted to ask though,
the
because
fastest we can do with the vampire is like 12 hours still. That's,
that's something else completely. But you're talking about them being able to see at night, and when I think about extraordinary abilities like that, or speed, or night vision, I automatically think of the government maybe trying to get a hold of this technology or abilities to either weaponize or to use on a militaristic level. What are some practical applications, or are you being courted by the military at all to have these vampires work for them?
I'm not at liberty to discuss a lot of the particulars of that answer, to be very honest with you, but I will say that we do from time to time communicate with the United States government, and we cooperate fully with the government of the United States. And from time to time, that does include just some cooperation on our part and some helpfulness. And a lot of what we're asked to do is a lot of just not ask hey, what's this for? But just kind of give them answer and say yes or no if we can do that, and et cetera. So that's probably more than I should say on the subject already. But we do at times cooperate and work with the government of the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So that kind of then leads me, on the topic of weaponization, to possibly our question of defense. The two-parter. First of all, how could a normal person like perhaps myself or Eliza, first of all, how could we possibly recognize that we were in the company of a vampire, and then secondly, what would be the best ways if we felt threatened to kind of defend ourselves?
Well, I'm going to answer the part about how to recognize if you are in the company of a vampire first. One thing is that most vampires are either very pale or they're very tan, but it's not, it's the kind of tan that just doesn't look exactly right, So that's one thing to look out for: extremities and skin tone.
Like a fake tan, like a spray tan.
Yeah, like a fake tan, or just like a paint on tan, or like just a heavy foundation. Depending on the vampire. A lot of vampires are older, and a lot of them, therefore, they look young, because once you become a vampire, the aging, you stop. You basically like preserve the whatever. Like if you're 29, you're gonna be 29 looking for the rest of the time. But you're gonna get older, but you're gonna still look like you're 29 or whatever. But one thing is they don't. It's hard for them to figure out what to dress like sometimes to look cool. So a lot of the times they don't dress right. So that's one thing to look out for, like a suspenders and belt combination.
Yeah.
Especially on a younger person, or like say if they're wearing like Nike shoes, but then they have like an Adidas pants.
Yeah.
That's just a real subtle but good sign.
Yeah, mixing brands. Yeah.
Yeah, mixing brands is a big thing that they don't know about. And then a lot of them, in terms of the men, a lot of them prefer to be clean shaven on the face. So if it's a clean shaven man, it's like a 50% chance, at least in most parts of America, it's like a 50% chance that a clean shaven man could be a vampire. So.
Okay, and that's really helpful. Yeah,
yeah. I think it's the chance that they may cut themselves. The blood is almost for some of them. It's it's like sexual almost. So
yeah,
I think that's part of it. It's like a fetish.
Risk. Yeah.
Fetish fetish community within the vampire community.
Yeah.
In terms of how to defend yourself against a vampire, there's the silver. All vampires are a little bit. They have a, what would you call it? Like a they have not an intolerance, but they
Like an allergy?
It's not even some of it's not even an allergy. It's just kind of like a little bit of an irritation for them, So, but they all will have a negative response to silver. Some of them it's like, if you spray it in their eyes, it'll blind them. Some of them it's just going to sting a little, that kind of depends on the vampire. Garlic is very effective. That's probably your best friend. I always have a shaker of the granulated garlic in per unit is not as potent as fresh garlic. Like if you minced it fresh, but who has the time to mince fresh garlic in the event of an aggressive vampire? So I always carry a little fresh garlic in my car, a little granulated garlic in my car, just in case I need to, form a perimeter or anything like that.
Yeah.
I find that's the best way. And then this is going to sound crazy, but conversation, just talking things through. I found a lot of that at the Institute's helpful. We had this one guy, he came in real hot. He said, he joined us. He joined us 2009. Came out of Wall Street and was a victim of the recession. So that's how he came to us. He had all this financial whiz bang power that he'd been using on Wall Street, and then that the bottom fell out of that. So he was available. He decided to use his vampire knowledge. Came over to us. Came in hot. Was telling us all this shit that he knows about. I know how all the vampires are. I know what's up. I'm very within the community, and then I just told him, listen, like, you may know a lot about your life as a vampire, but we know a lot about like the history of vampires here at the Institute. We've done a lot. We've done our research. We know. So I know that and you have things to bring to the table, but you got to accept that we have things to bring to the table. And he took that well, and we really formed a partnership, and that became a friendship. And so talking it through is you can't underestimate the power of that.
Yeah. So our biggest line of defense probably just one-on-one communication.
I mean, if the vampire's a dick, you may want to just spray him in the throat with some silver first, but it all depends,
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe talking it out.
Yeah. That's just for life. That's always a good idea first.
Yeah.
Just try to talk it out.
Yeah, I mean, now that we know they're for sure among us, we have the ways that we can spot them. It certainly helps, to be able to relate to someone other than you on a human level.
And they're not trying to hurt you. Most of them. Yeah. Most of them are cool. Most of them, they may want to. It's normal. I think a lot of people should know this. It's normal for them to ask you about your blood. A lot of people, they say, Dr. French, I met this vampire. First thing he asked, what's my blood type? Well, I know for you and me that may feel like a threatening question, but for them, that's just that's like kind of like hair color almost. It's just a really prominent and important identifying feature. So, don't be offended if a vampire does talk about blood a lot. If they talk about it too much, that's probably a good sign that they're going to try to either kill you or eat you or both. But that's pretty rare.
It's like when you go to somebody's apartment, you're like, oh, this is really nice. Oh, if you don't mind me asking, how much is your rent? I mean, I guess that's sort of like, oh, nice to meet you. If you don't mind me asking, what's your blood type? It's like, it's just something that they're interested in, I guess. You just have to be open to it.
And it's like you go to somebody's apartment, there's about as good of a chance that you're going to get murdered by that person as you are going to get eaten, killed, by a vampire. So I think that's a really important takeaway for folks who are new to the subjects to go home with as they listen. It's like there's some vampires that you should be very scared of and very threatened by, but it's it's an individual by individual basis.
Sure.
And that seems to be what we reinforce almost every week here on Real True Facts, that you're going to have good and bad anything. You're going to have good and bad werewolves, good and bad vampires. They're not all inherently evil, and I think that's.
I got a bag of peanuts on the flight over at the board meeting earlier. I got a bag of peanuts on the flight out. Terrific, honey roasted. They're so good. Flight back, I got another bag because I figured, loved the first bag so much, but this bag on the way home was not as good. So, just to your point.
Not all peanuts. They're not all good. They're not all bad. Yeah, humans are the same way. I mean,
yeah, it's just about the same with everything.
Yeah, about the same with anything.
Sure.
Yeah. Wow, that's deep. Doc French, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for joining us for our last week of the Real True Facts Monster Mash, talking about vampires, Dracula, peanuts, Nike, Adidas, everything under the sun. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming in. And best of luck with your future research.
If anyone out there's listening, guys, stay tuned. The website is currently down pending the next board meeting to determine the final name of the institute. But either avir.edu or avri.edu. That's the best place to go to find out what we're doing and to also donate if you're so inclined, just to see how you can get involved. And just remember, there's vampires everywhere. Some of them are cool. Some of them will help you start your car and stuff like that. And some of them are trying to eat your blood.
Yeah. Stay safe out there. Doc French, again, thank you so much. We'll take a quick break. And when we come back to Real True Facts, we'll open up our Real True Facts mailbag. We're back from our final break on Real True Facts, and we've got a spooky mailbag question tonight. We've been asking all of our listeners to weigh in on their favorite females in horror, all their favorite monsters, and so we asked a couple questions there. We actually got a nice question in response.
Okay, yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah. So Ryland from Orange County writes in response to our question, who is your favorite female in horror? And he says, Erica Christensen and Swim Fan scared the shit out of me. Are women villains in horror a modern concept? Which I think is cool to ask, because we were trying to think of some classic ones and we really were having a hard time.
Yeah, and that's a good point. There are some really great modern female villains. I don't know if they're monster, the kind of the same kind of monster, because as soon as you mentioned Swim Fan, I'm thinking of Fatal Instinct, or Basic Instinct, and
Basic Instinct.
Yeah, Sharon Stone, and perhaps the Femme Fatale, and there's just some really great female kind of psychological villains, whether it's Basic Instinct or Fatal Attraction, with Glenn Close, Single White Female.
Oh yeah, and we posed the question on our Instagram, which you can find at Real True Facts Graham. We ask a lot of questions on there, so you can always get engaged that way. But someone else brought up Evil Dead. They brought up the old woman, or the demon from Evil Dead, which was a great horror icon, albeit still very modern, but another great example as well.
What was the demon from the Evil Dead?
It was, if I remember correctly, they one of the women in the camping party got possessed, and they trapped her underneath the floorboards, I guess in the cellar, and so she kept popping up from underneath the floorboards. It was chained, and so she just had this like crazed face, and I believe it was a possession.
Okay.
From that, which I know was like a comedy horror, but still, that's all practical effects there. So that's terrifying makeup and movie. So I don't think that was based on anything in real life, but we know that possessions happen. So, if we're looking at that, obviously we've got witches, we've got The Exorcist. That's a great female in horror. But the question of female villains, I guess monsters, if we were looking at Dracula or something like that, I guess that is a modern concept, because all of our examples are maybe women in real life that maybe were scorned, and so they have some kind of motivation to act out. Or we have modern possessions. If we look at The Exorcist, that was a little girl that just happened to become possessed, so they didn't start out evil.
Yeah, and The Exorcist is a little that's a difficult one, because I believe the demon possessing the child Regan was Pazuzu, I believe.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. So demons. I guess gender gets a little more difficult to pin down, but yeah, and the hand that rocks the cradle.
Mm-hmm.
So as we go on, 80s and 90s. Movies will just kind of flash in my head.
Because if we think about stories, especially with the Invisible Man in that movie, or even the Wolfman, we're looking at instances where the women were typically in distress, or they were the love interest, or victims.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we go on, especially in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we start seeing this shift of women kind of taking on more of a villainous role, rather than just playing the damsel in distress. So, maybe to answer that question, maybe that is a very modern concept, because back in the day, the monsters were just male, because the women, they probably didn't think they had it in them to be a villain.
Yeah, it's kind of these classic monsters, if we're going from perhaps a movie or literature standpoint, are a reflection of our society. We don't have we didn't give women very many rights, so they weren't seen as powerful, whether it was
a threat,
positive or negative. And they weren't given a lot of times the opportunity to create these stories, or and create things that and if they were, then maybe they would create heroes or heroines that were more relatable. So now we finally become a little more enlightened, so we know that females enjoy some of the creative power that they deserve, so we can have some modern tales. Unfortunately, we still have some work to do as far as giving females and some other folks who aren't middle-aged white men. We still have some a little bit of work to do to
representation. And I didn't even realize this. Like, as we were going through research, it was you that brought all this up initially, and I remember thinking, there's definitely classic. There's definitely female monsters, and I thought of La Llorona and the Wailing Bride and all that stuff, and that was really the only one I could come up with. Everything else was just modern. Or I think about like Disney villainesses like Cruella de Vil. Like, she's definitely a bad guy, but classic, not in that sense.
Yeah, and they're even, if we take it another step and past gender and even go to race, they're kind of middle-aged white guys, right? Even Dracula is usually a middle-aged white guy. Even Frankenstein, middle-aged white guy. Yeah. Wolfman, middle-aged. Even like the creature from the Black Lagoon. I'm not as familiar with that, but just the way, the way he carries himself, it's going to be a middle-aged white guy.
Yeah, they're probably. So, and then we brought up Bride of Frankenstein, and it's like, was she even a monster, or an object of desire? An
accessory, unfortunately.
Yeah, an accessory, exactly. So it is a modern concept, and as the horror progresses, I would really love to see that. And I still pose this question: if there are any that we are leaving out, especially from different countries, because I know we have listeners from all over the world. If there is a legend or a story or something that features a female creature outside of Monster Mash or not, let us know. You can email us at mail@realtruefactspodcast.com, or you can message us on Instagram at realtruefactsgram. Let us know, because we want to keep doing our research here. We want to get away from all the middle-aged white guys. So But let us know. You can find more info about our shows on our Instagram and answer questions that we post there, polls, different featurettes behind the guests on our show. And it's just a great way for us to connect with everybody.
Yep, and another good way to communicate with us is leave a review or a message on whether it's Apple or Google or one of the platforms. Leave a rating and a review. Those always help out and are another good way to communicate your thoughts.
Yes, please do. Yeah, keep tuning in. Tell your friends. The more people listen to us, better we can do our jobs. This is a public service that we provide to everybody, and we want to make sure that we're putting the best possible content out there. So please send us an email, leave a review, and let us know if there's any platform that we're not on that we should be on, which I think is impossible at this point. I think we're everywhere now, but if there is one that we're not on, let us know, and we'll make sure and get on that too. So I think that'll do it for us today. I'd like to thank Dr. Seymour again. I'd love to thank our exceptional guest, Doc French, from the AVIR or the AVRI, depending on what day of the week it is. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you to all of our listeners from all over the world who keep tuning in. Monster Mash was a success, so thank you for our tuning into our multi-week experiment. Hopefully you enjoyed the long Halloween season as we did. And also, like we always say, keep questioning your world. Because just because you read about it or hear about it doesn't mean it's true. We'll see you next time for another episode of Real True Facts.
Podmoth.